They were never the loudest, never the flashiest, but somehow, 30 years later, everyone's talking about MXPX again. Something's happening in pop punk, and it's not a revival. It's a reckoning. Suddenly, MXPX is everywhere. Their old songs are going viral. Teenagers who weren't even born when Chick Magnet dropped are quoting Mike Herrera on TikTok. They were called loud and snotty, fast and vulgar, too punk for Christians and too Christian for punks. But that was always the point. They were raw, imperfect, and unapologetic. A tweet went viral last month. MXPX lyrics hit harder at 25 than they ever did at 15. Because maybe, just maybe, this comeback says more about the world than it does about the band. So why now? Why is everyone talking about MXPX again in 2025? This is the story of MXPX, a pop-punk band that never sold out, but still won millions of hearts around the world. Let's rewind to where it all began. It's the early 90s, Bremerton, Washington, a small town where nothing much happened, except 3 teens decided to make music until the walls shook. Mike Herrera on bass and vocals, Yuri Rulli on drums, and Tom Wisniewski on guitar didn't set out to change anything. They just wanted to play fast, shout louder than their doubts, and maybe make it out of Bremerton alive. MXPX, originally Magnified Plaid, started like every great punk story, with no money, no plan, no permission. Photocopied flyers, backyard shows, duct tape gear. But their sound was sharp, metal, and raw. Their code? DIY or die. In 1994, Tooth and Nail Records took a chance on them, and suddenly, the basements of Bremerton echoed across America's youth. Those raw, sweaty nights, kids shoulder to shoulder screaming lyrics they barely knew. That's where punk found its heartbeat again. Unlike polished pop or gloomy grunge, MXPX sang about what kids actually felt. Insecurity, faith, screw-ups, and small-town boredom. As Herrera once told Alternative Press, we weren't trying to preach or pose. We were just being ourselves. Kids who believed in something, but also wanted to jump off a stage. That contradiction of faith and rebellion, chaos and conscience, was their fuel. And it made MXPX dangerous in all the right ways. If punk was reborn in the suburbs, MXPX was its pulse. The year was 1996. Life in general dropped and everything changed. Chick Magnet became a cult anthem, turning garage kids into dreamers with a 3-chord mission. They weren't just catchy, they were therapeutic songs. It told you it was okay to feel awkward, angry, or left behind. Before emo found its eyeliner, MXPX made vulnerability sound cool. In a scene ruled by Dookie-era Green Day and Blink-182's rise, MXPX held their own. Never too corporate, never too underground. They stayed in the trenches, still playing sweaty VFW halls and skateparks long after TV cameras left. Fans remember. As one wrote on Reddit, they were the only band that felt like us, not trying to be famous, just trying to survive. By 2000, the ever-passing moment refined their edge without softening it. Responsibility hit MTV. The Warped Tour crowd sang along. Every lyric, every line. And it was like a generation finding its conscience. They were the everyman's punk band, proof that success doesn't have to sell your soul. What touched the world was the core of MXPX's noise that spoke of honesty. Their lyrics weren't an escape. They were real-life confessions set to loud guitars. Herrera's songwriting walked a razor's edge between punk grit and spiritual reflection. Songs like Doing Time, Let It Happen, and My Life Story didn't preach. They wrestled. With faith, with guilt, and with purpose. Here's where it gets interesting. Their early label, Tooth and Nail Records, put them in the Christian rock aisle, a box they never asked for. MXPX played church festivals one week and punk dives the next, sometimes catching heat from both sides. But that tension became their power. They made doubt sound like courage. Critics couldn't label them. Too Christian for punks, too punk for church. But fans saw through the noise. They heard a voice that wasn't afraid to doubt. In an interview with HM Magazine, Herrera said, "We were never about telling people what to believe. We were about figuring it out. Together." That openness and refusal to fit in made them revolutionary in a scene built on defiance. You could scream, you could believe, you could be broken, and still belong. To the emo punk nation, MXPX didn't make them a believer. They made them believe it's okay to question, Now, as Gen Z rediscovers their catalog, those same songs feel strangely modern. Faith without rules, rebellion without hate, truth without filters. And that was the whole purpose. We remember MXPX's career was built on tension between who they were and what people expected them to be. People called them sellouts for signing to a label. Conservative fans accused them of abandoning their faith. But the truth was they just kept evolving. In 1998, when Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo hit the charts, some fans balked. It was heavier, grittier, less youth group punk, more real-world frustration. But that was the point. Punknews.org once described them as a band too pop for hardcore and too punk for the mainstream. And maybe that's why they endured. They didn't belong anywhere, so they belonged to everyone. Herrera summed it up best. We never stopped being MXPX. We just stopped explaining it. That quiet defiance became their badge of honor. Even as labels came and went, trends shifted and radio forgot them. They stood tall on the sidelines, where punk's real heart always beats. And that's exactly where they started becoming legendary again. Now let's talk about MXPX's legendary albums, each one a snapshot of a generation growing up in distortion. In 1996, Life in General released and was pure youth energy. Chick Magnet was a super hit that gave identity to dry teenage humor wrapped in melodic punch. It quietly sold over 200,000 copies, an incredible success for a band on a small Christian label. Fans began sketching the MXPX Pockanacha Punk logo on their school binders without realizing it had become the symbol of suburban rebellion. But that wasn't enough. In 1998, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo roared in, rawer, heavier, and Billboard charting. It proved punk could have depth without losing its sneer. The album sold over 250,000 copies and got gold certification in Canada. Some fans still call it their Green Day moment, except MXPX never sold out. By 2000, the ever-passing moment refined their sound without losing its edge. Responsibility hit MTV's TRL, pushing their music to a generation that was supposed to have outgrown punk. But they didn't. Millennials still quote it on TikTok today, calling it the song that made growing up hurt less. In 2002, Let's Rock and Panic in 2005 were survival songs, not made for radio, but for the faithful. Herrera's voice cracked, the guitar snarled, and the production was stripped bare. Even as pop-punk turned business, MXPX held the line. The sound of every kid who refused to trade heart for hype. As Rolling Stone later wrote, MXPX captured what Blink and Sum 41 couldn't. The everyday punk's exhaustion and hope. And maybe that's why, even now, every record still feels like growing up, falling down, and getting back up. Louder than before. Before social media, there were handwritten letters. Before DMs, there were concert tables. Before fandoms had names, MXPX fans already felt like family. Fans showed up early to help set up gear, stayed late to talk about life, heartbreak, or faith. For every awkward teen who felt misunderstood, MXPX provided language for the chaos. Fans wrote on Twitter, "I didn't grow up religious, but MXPX made me feel like maybe there's something pure in not giving up on yourself." They were everywhere, literally from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtracks to mixtapes traded in lockers. Ask any millennial who burned CDs in 2002, MXPX was on it. They gave us something the radio never could, community, and that connection never really broke. It just went offline for a while. Pop was thriving, indie was rising, and EDM was rewriting the sound of the decade. But for MXPX, it felt like the world had moved on without them. They didn't vanish, they just stopped shouting. Members started families, side projects, and podcasts. Herrera moved to Texas and began producing from his home studio. Yet, even in the silence, something simmered. They kept releasing albums under their own label, experimenting, staying fiercely independent. No deadlines, no radio hits, just music. Their diehard fans never left. Forums, niche blogs, and local shows kept the torch alive. As Herrera said in a 2016 interview, "We realized the world didn't owe us attention, but we owed the world our honesty." And that's the thing about authenticity. It doesn't age. It just waits for the noise to die down. And when it finally did, MXPX was still there. Older, wiser, and ready to turn the volume back up. Then came the spark. In 2018, MXPX dropped a self-titled album. entirely funded by fans through Kickstarter. The campaign blew past its goal in under 24 hours, proving that punk loyalty could still outmuscle industry marketing. No label, no middleman, just thousands of backers bringing their band back to life. It became their highest charting record in over a decade, and a blueprint for how to rebuild punk rock from the ground up. By 2023, Find a Way Home landed like a mission statement. Sharp hooks, grown-up lyrics, zero gimmicks. Alt Press called it a masterclass in how to age without losing fire. Then came the viral twist. Old MXPX footage, sweaty clubs, scuffed sneakers, flying bodies, resurfaced on TikTok. Teens skated to Doing Time. Parents duetted Responsibility with their kids. Spotify reported a 175% spike in streams among listeners under 25. One fan tweet said it best. "My dad played MXPX in the car. Now I'm playing it for my kid." That's a legacy. In a world craving something real again, MXPX brought back what music had lost. Loud, honest, and human. They didn't just return. They reminded us what punk feels like. Here's the thing. MXPX isn't rediscovered. They're being seen in a whole new light. For millennials, their music is therapy. Every chord is a time capsule of simpler chaos. For Gen Z, it's rebellion against fake perfection. Their lyrics about growing up, taking responsibility, and chasing meaning hit harder in a world drowning in digital noise. "We grew up," Herrera told Kerrang recently, "but the world's struggles stayed the same, just with better Wi-Fi." That's the secret of MXPX's endurance. Timeless themes, unfiltered sound. While others leaned on nostalgia, they leaned on truth. It's why even young listeners still feel the same aura as in the early 90s. It feels more honest than half of what's on the charts right now. In a culture obsessed with sexualized lyrics, MXPX is proof that sincerity can still trend. They never needed a makeover, just a moment for the world to crave something real again. So why is everyone talking about MXPX again? Because they never stopped being themselves. Because they stayed loyal to their roots, while the rest of the scene blurred into memory. Because in a landscape of disposable art, they remind us that integrity can outlive fame. Their fingerprints are everywhere. From Paramore's emotional candor, to Neck Deep's melodic grit, to the bedroom bands recording raw truth instead of chasing trends. Ask the fans. They'll tell you, they aged, but they didn't change. And maybe that's what we all needed. Something that stayed honest. In the end, MXPX's story isn't just about punk rock. It's about endurance. About keeping your soul when the world wants your brand. Maybe that's why everyone's talking about MXPX again. Because when the dust settles, all that's left is what's real.
This next band hooked up in high school and they've been together ever since.
So in the end, MXPX never sold out. They just outlasted everyone. They didn't chase fame. They chased the truth. And somehow, 30 years later, that's exactly what the world came back for. But maybe the real question is, did MXPX change, or did we finally catch up? We'd love your comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to our channel. For more deep dives into your favorite bands and the stories behind them, drop every week.